Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1518 Today's date is March 11th, 2018, and the title of the episode is, It Has Already Begun. The Central Banks Begin to Defend Its Actions. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded a new interview with Dan Reitzik. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So all you need to do is go over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you to the interview. You can play it right there. Or you can come over to x22report.com or newsentinel.com. Scroll down a little bit. Look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the interview there. You can play it right on the site. Or you can go to Steemit. That is steemit.com. Steemit.com/@X22 Report. And you can play the interview right on Steemit. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, as we can see, things are really starting to heat up and everything's starting to accelerate. And it looks like right now that a lot of individuals within government, as CEOs of financial institutions and CEOs of other firms, they're going to be selling their stocks, they're going to be resigning, and everything's going to start to change. I mean, we already see Cohn. He left because he didn't like what Trump was doing with the tariffs. Of course, remember, these individuals, they're part of the system. When you're not working with their system, they don't want to be a part of it. We already see Lloyd Blankfein, who is the CEO of Goldman, he's stepping down. Now, Q is out there saying that Cohn, his decision to leave was not his choice. He was actually told to leave. And what we're seeing right now, and I do believe that we're going to see a lot more individuals start to leave the White House. And we're going to see a lot of CEOs, maybe Jamie Dimon and many others, start to remove themselves from their positions. Because what I think is happening right now is we're at the phase where things are all coming around these type of individuals, especially the central bank. And I know the corporate media is out there screaming about, trade wars, tariffs are terrible. Now, remember, the corporate media, they have an agenda. And whatever they're saying, it's most likely the opposite. Actually, many times when we look at the situations, it's always been the opposite. Now, China, and of course what they're saying is China's going to start a trade war. It's going to be disastrous. But actually, China is out there, and remember, Trump is speaking to China quite often, Xi Jinping. And China is saying, listen, we're not looking to have a trade war. Because if we do have a trade war, it would bring disaster to our two countries as well as the rest of the world. China does not wish to fight a trade war, nor will China initiate a trade war. So this was already discussed ahead of time. And right now, China is not going to make the next move. Now, of course, it looks like what the corporate media is doing is the same thing they did with North Korea, where North Korea is getting ready to attack. North Korea is getting ready to do this. We're getting ready with all our war plans to go into North Korea. They're building it up to make us feel like this is what's going to happen, but the opposite is happening right now. And all of this is being done on purpose. There's no coincidence. There's nothing like this. This is a plan that has been set, and they're following the plan to completely transition the economy into the new system. The system that we are in, this is the deep state central bank system. And when all is said and done, they will be removing the central bank. Now, they have already started to maneuver in that direction. And they do it very slowly. They get reports together. They need to gather the evidence to make the case to the American people to tell everyone why we need to get rid of the central bank. Now, if we go back to 2015, there was a study by researchers at Duke University and the University of California at Berkeley pointing to quantitative evidence that the Fed consistently leaks non-public information about its meeting. Well, that's really hard to believe. We all kind of knew this. Now, the study, first reported by the Daily Californian, considers historical patterns in stock prices relative to the distribution of non-public Fed information. The Fed uses informal communication channels on an even-numbered weeks after FOMC meetings. This is what the report is saying, pointing to leaks making it into media stories such as the Wall Street Journal, as well as showing up in private financial advice. To support their claims, researchers pointed to a private advice received by financial investors and news reports that contain non-public information discussed in FOMC meetings. The informal communications can steer market expectations by engaging with private forecasters and newsletters that influence market inference of current and future policy. This is what the report said, citing the goal of managing market expectations. Informal communication facilitates learning by the Fed from financial sector about how the Fed's assessment of the economy compares to that of the financial sector and about how markets are likely to react to particularly policy decisions. Now, to take this a step further, we can see that 3 years later, after this report came out, even though there was still no prosecutions or no charges against the Fed that they were leaking information, a new report by the University of Chicago Booth School of Business PhD candidate David Feiner has exposed the Fed's clear manipulation and rigging of financial markets through leaked information. Now, Feiner found a jump in New York City taxi cab activity between the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and major Wall Street banks around the time of central bank policy meetings. Now, this is how they were passing information around. This way, it can't be tracked using phones, emails, or anything like that. And the study's author says the findings suggest an increase in informal communications between Fed employees and individuals in the private sector could be occurring. Now, Mr. Feiner used government-provided GPS coordinates, vehicle information, and other travel data to track taxi traffic between the addresses of the New York Fed and major banks. His research pointed to increased traffic between the destinations around lunch and late evening hours, which suggest informal meetings were taking place. And it was between all the banks and the central bank. And he showed the patterns when they were coming out with information, actually right before that. Now, again, what was said, what was passed along, we don't know that as of yet. I mean, if they sent an email, if they were doing it over the phone, that could be intercepted, that could be deciphered, but this cannot be. What they're looking at is something definitely changed. Now, we need to go back in time a little bit, and we need to remember that last year, the former Richmond Fed President Jeffrey Lacker, he stepped down after revealing he had accidentally confirmed sensitive information about a Fed bond buying program to a financial information firm and then failed to report the disclosure. Well, he didn't accidentally do it. He got caught doing it because we see this is what the Fed does. The central banks, they are intertwined with the banking system, with Wall Street. And they're very slick in the way they communicate between each other. Because if it was ever found out that they were actually giving information and they were leaking information, well, this would be a really bad spot the central bank would be in. And we can see right now with these studies that are coming out in these reports, and we're going to see a lot more of these, because what they're going to be doing is they're going to be building this case of what the Fed has been doing. Now, this is going to go a lot deeper, because once this audit bill is passed, it is going to be game over for the Fed. And I believe this is why they're taking this audit the Fed and adding it as an amendment to another bill. This way it can be pushed through and Trump will then sign it. Then they'll have an outside or a governmental agency, which I think it should be an outside agency, but let the intergovernment agency go ahead and take a look at it. They're going to find things that we always assumed was happening, and it's going to come to light that, yes, the Fed manipulates the market. The Fed has been creating currency out of thin air and propping up the banking system and certain Wall Street types. They've been doing a lot of illegal activity, And we're going to find out that we don't need the central bank anymore. And this is the whole point. Trump has already alluded to this. Q has already alluded to this. He has Andrew Jackson hanging on the wall of the White House. And we already know that you need to cut off the source of the deep state, and that is the central banking system. And again, this is the IMF, this is the Biz, this is the Fed, this is all of it. It leads all the way up to the Rothschilds. And they're the ones who created this monstrosity because they understood, listen, we can create currency. I mean, think about their business. Think about their business model. They went up to governments and they said, listen, we can create currency and we will handle your economy. And back then, they created currency by printing paper and putting ink to paper and saying, here you go, this is real currency now. And governments and, kingdoms accepted this. And they said, yeah, this is great. And they knew by doing this, their systems with interest attached to whatever money they're loaning to the governments or kingdoms, that it would only last for 40 to 45 years, maybe 50 years at the most, depending on how they structure their system. And then the whole thing would have to be reset again. But while this was happening, they would be able to control governments. They would make themselves very, very wealthy. Not by creating the currency, because that's worthless. They knew they'd be able to buy assets on pennies on the dollar. And they'd become very, very wealthy in that way. And this is exactly what is happening. They have control over governments. They become very wealthy, very powerful, and you never hear about them in the news. Because those are the wealthiest people in the world. It's not Oprah. It's not Bill Gates. These individuals have trillions and trillions, and not paper. They have assets. And we can see right now, we are in the process of going after the central banking system. That's the whole entire push right now. And yes, there's many, many layers. But for our economic system to move forward, the whole thing has to be reset. Because right now, we're under the rule of a central banking system, which has then corrupted many other factions, and the whole thing's a complete mess. So right now, we are seeing that there are studies going on, there are reports going on. We have the Audit the Fed bill that's being pushed through. And if that gets through, it is game over for the Fed. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.